Okay, go. Hi there, my name's Lori Weiler, and this is going to be my video for the sheep brain dissection. I am going to go ahead and start with just identifying different areas of the brain that are easily visible or accessible before I cut into it, and then I can go ahead and cut into the brain. So the first part that I wanted to identify is probably the easiest thing to identify for most people. It's the part where the brain, where it connects to the spinal cord. So this is right where the spinal cord connection is. And that, the spinal cord is responsible for carrying nerve signals to the body and brain and back and forth. So this is obviously a very essential part of the brain. And then when you flip the brain over, the spinal cord then goes into the brain stem. So this whole area right here is the brain stem, and that controls the flow of messages from the brain and to the rest of the body and back and forth. So this is a vital area of the brain to kind of communicate what is needed to be done throughout the body. Then if I flip it back over here, we can see the cerebrum. And the cerebrum is essentially these areas right here, all on the top. And the cerebrum is responsible for coordinating movement and regulating temperature. And it also contributes to speech, learning, judgment, emotions. So the cerebrum plays a huge role in who we are as humans and what we do, what we process, all these different types of things. The cerebrum plays a big part in that. Then I'm going to go ahead and address all these different folds of the brain. So typically when people think of the brain, they see these different folds and bumps, and these are known as the sulci and gyri. And essentially they segregate the brain into different areas and borders, and this allows the brain to have more surface area as well. So these little folds, which you see typical of a brain, do serve a purpose, and they do kind of show you that there's different areas of the brain. Then I'm going to go ahead and move down to the bottom of the brain here to the cerebellum. And the cerebellum's this section right here, and it coordinates movement for the brain. So typically, let's say someone's walking the line after doing a sobriety test. The cerebellum may be the part of the brain that's affected because of because it is contributing to the movement of the person. And then right below the cerebellum is the pons, and the pons are responsible for unconscious processes. So that's, for example, breathing, sleeping. So again, if we go back to the sobriety example, oftentimes if people drink a lot, their breathing may slow, they may not be able to think correctly. That's all because this area of the brain is being affected. Then once we go to the pons, we then move to the medulla right here. That's this area. And the medulla allows the nerve signals to cross over hemispheres. So for example, a lot of times if something was happening on the left side of the brain, that would then control the right side of the body. So the medulla is responsible for this transfer of information and signals. So from one hemisphere to another, the medulla plays a huge part. So that's right here. And then the midbrain is right here, and it controls right through here, kind of right here. It can helps with motor movement and visual processing, audio processing, auditory processing, and visual processing. So the midbrain can't be forgotten. It's important. Then I'm going to go ahead and address the different lobes. So we have the occipital lobe back here by the cerebellum. And the occipital lobe is responsible for visual messages. So receiving, getting the input, interpreting, that's all the occipital lobe right here. And then you have the temporal lobe, and it's just where you think it is, right on the side where your temporal bones are. And the temporal lobe is responsible for hearing and smelling, senses like that. So very essential for many senses throughout our day that we're needing. And then the frontal lobe at the front, right here, is responsible for motor function as well. It also is right near the olfactory bulb, so it is also coordinates and helps with smell as well. So motor function and smell. And then the parietal lobe is kind of here at the top, to the side top. So here, not quite to the temporal, but right up here. That's the parietal lobe, and it's responsible for sensory information. So these are things like perception and the five senses. So think touch, sensation, perception, hearing, whatever that may be. These senses are controlled by that lobe right here, the parietal lobe. Then we come to our big part of the dissection, and that's the medial longitudinal fissure. Is this long line here. It divides the brain in half. So essentially you have the left and the right hemisphere, and that's what this fissure does. It essentially creates a beautiful picture of us being able to cut it right in half. So I'm going to go ahead and cut along the medial longitudinal fissure so we can see some things on the inside, such as different tracts and nerves. So bear with me just a second while I go ahead and cut into this lovely brain here. And once we open it up, then we can see different areas of the brain. So now we get a better picture of the cerebellum. We get a different area. And then right here in the middle is where all the optic information is. The nerve, the tract, the chiasm, they're going to be right here in in this middle area here. And the optic nerve is essential for sending signals from the eyes to the brain and back and forth. The tract then carries that visual information, and the chiasm creates a visual pathway for the optic nerve. So this whole area is very essential for vision. Then we have the thalamus, and the thalamus is right below, right over here, and that is essentially the relay station for body senses, all except smell. So hearing, taste, touch. Right below the thalamus is the hypothalamus, and that is essential for regulation. So physiological and biological processes such as feeding, growth, body, temperature, sleep rhythms, those things like that are right by the hypothalamus. Then we have the pineal gland, which probably is hard to see in here, but it's right kind of in this area here. It's by the optic nerve. And the pineal gland is responsible for hormone production. So that area is, if someone's struggling with hormones or producing hormones, there's a little small area where the pineal gland is being affected. Now we can move to a pretty easy part that's to identify, and that's the olfactory bulb. And that's going to be located right up here, right towards the front of the brain. And this helps with sense of smell, which makes sense because it's right towards the front of the brain, right where your nose would be. So it's going to be kind of in this area right here is the olfactory bulb. So essentially that's the parts of the brain. If you put it back together, you see a better picture of the brain and all the different areas and the different lobes. But that's the end of my project for the sheep dissection. And that is all. Thank you very much.